statistically, I should be in prison. I was certainly practicing a life of crime or learning it early on. A friend of mine, Roy, and I would break into a house across the street, and we loved this house because the guy had a gun collection. So we would get into the gun cabinet, and we would lay down in the bedroom and shoot through the hallway into the living room where we had put a phone book, and inside of another person's house with their guns, and then we'd kind of clean everything up and put it all back and take away any evidence that we were there and do it again later in the week. We were shoplifting. I remember stealing stuff from stores and getting caught once, and it didn't feel like a life of crime. It just felt like a childhood, like you're just going to get into mischief, But it would have led to trouble. There's no question that it would have led to trouble. Growing up without a dad, it never occurred to me that I was growing up without a father. There are 27 million kids growing up in America without dads, and so there's a lot of us everywhere. Every time you walk into a room with a group of people, the fatherless crisis is in that room. And it is tied to unwanted pregnancy. Most of the girls who are pregnant in an unwanted pregnancy or an unintended pregnancy are from fatherless homes. 70% of teen suicides, fatherless homes. More than 70% of teen dropouts from school, fatherless homes. Very high percentage of kids who experiment with drugs. An overwhelming 85% of people in prison grow up in fatherless homes. So it has a dramatic effect on the family. My dad left when I was 2 years old. So he and my mother met when they were in college and got married pretty quickly. About a year later, my sister was born. Another year and a half later, I was born. And then things started falling apart. And both of them have kind of told me the story since. And it's just a sort of a standard American divorce situation. But my dad did leave when I was 2. I saw him another couple times before junior high, but it would be years in between, and it would be the equivalent of a lunch or something like that. Although we did go 1 week into his home. And then he disappeared completely. I text messaged several friends, about 10, and said, tomorrow I'm going to see my dad for the first time in 30 years. Will you ask me tomorrow night how it went? And I knew that at that point I had to do it. So going into it, super intense, greeted him with a hug, and we sat down. He never turned off the television. He was watching Fox News the whole time. He had a beer in his hand. And he went through probably 3 or 4 beers, the hours that we were together, talking to me and telling me the story about the divorce and what had happened. His side of the story made complete sense. There was a lot of, well, that makes sense, actually. It doesn't excuse abandoning your children, but it makes sense. He asked for my forgiveness, and I said, I forgive you. And my pastor, Rick McKinley, had defined forgiveness in a sermon, I think, that year, where he said, forgiveness is where you bear the burden somebody has given you, but you no longer hold them responsible. And I think I had thought that forgiveness, you could only forgive somebody when you were over it, when you were no longer in pain. And Rick really redefined that. And it was a wonderful paradigm shift to just go, you know what, I'm probably always going to bear the pain of this, but I forgive you. Literally, I won't use it anymore. It's no longer a social commodity that I use to try to manipulate you. It's really done. I forgive you. I set you free from a social jail that I keep in my heart, right? And so when I said I forgive you to my dad, I meant it. And this was 2 years ago. I've never had an ill thought toward him since. It's over. Do I still deal with issues of fatherlessness? Sure. I mean, I'm going to deal with that for the rest of my life, as I think most people who grow up without a dad. But it doesn't have anything to do with my dad. And even in my mid-30s, I would say more than any other transition in my life, walked into his house as a boy and left as a man. I didn't realize that till much later, but I had always thought that, even as a child, that there was something that was so wrong with me that my dad left. That I was so repulsive of a human being that my dad had to take off. There was a part of my subconscious that bought into that message. And then meeting my dad and realizing, wait a second, this is just a guy. This is just a human being who had his own stuff that he had to deal with, and certainly was actually thinking of me and loved me, and must have been very painful that he missed me, but had his own issues that were bigger than his ability to love at the time. And so walked out of the house in a, it was an instant, but over the next year, feeling this great weight lifted from me of just like, I'm actually fine. Like, nobody, like that message that I got in my head that somebody was so repulsed by me that they had to leave was absolutely inaccurate. Like, I lived life under this weight that didn't really exist.